The dining room in my parents' sprawling Seattle suburb home smelled of rosemary and roasted lamb, but no amount of candlelight or fine china could warm the chill in the air. The crystal chandelier cast soft glows on the mahogany table, where my mother's perfectly manicured hands arranged napkins with surgical precision. My father sat at the head, his silver hair catching the light, while my sister, Marigold Hensley, held court as always. At 31, Marigold was the family's golden child, a journalist whose bylines graced the front pages of the Pacific Herald. Tonight, her emerald eyes sparkled with the kind of confidence that made everyone lean in. "Big news," Marigold said, standing to clink her wine glass, her voice smooth as a radio host's. "I've been invited to MC the National Media Gala this Saturday. It's the biggest event in the industry, and they chose me to run the show." My mother gasped, her fork hovering midair, while my father's stern face softened into a rare smile. "That's my girl," he said, raising his glass. "To Marigold, always making us proud." I, Zinnia Caldwell, 27, and the family's designated disappointment, sat quietly, pushing a piece of asparagus around my plate. My dark hair was pulled into a messy bun, and my sweater felt out of place among the tailored dresses and pressed suits. Marigold's success was no surprise. She'd always had a knack for stealing the spotlight without breaking a sweat. Perfect. Grades, perfect job, perfect life. Me? I was the one they pitied, the one who hadn't figured it out yet. "Isn't it amazing?" my mother said, her voice dripping with pride. She turned to me, her smile sharpening. "Zinnia, you could learn a thing or two from your sister. A real career like Marigold's is something to aspire to." I bit the inside of my cheek, swallowing the sting. My work, creating a podcast about mental health called Soul Sanctuary, wasn't even a blip on their radar. To them, it was a hobby, a childish distraction from the serious path Marigold had chosen. "Oh, come on, Mom," Marigold said, tossing her blonde curls with a laugh. "Zinnia's too busy playing with her little recordings to think about a real job. What do you even do all day? Talk into a microphone and hope someone listens?" Her words landed like a slap, and I felt my fingers tighten around my fork. My podcast had millions of downloads, had changed lives, but to her it was nothing. "Marigold has a point," my father said, his voice low and final. "You're 27, Zinnia. It's time to stop chasing dreams and start building a future. Look at your sister. She's hosting the biggest media event of the year. That's what success looks like." I wanted to scream, to tell them about the emails piling up in my inbox, the sponsorship deals, the award I'd be accepting at that very gala. But I didn't. Not yet. "I'm doing fine," I said softly, my voice barely audible over the clink of glasses. Marigold snorted. "Fine? You're scraping by in that tiny apartment, making podcasts nobody cares about. Meanwhile, I'm about to share a stage with the biggest names in journalism." She leaned forward, her smile smug. "They're paying me $15,000 just to MC, plus a feature in The Atlantic. Did I mention that?" My mother practically swooned. "Oh, Marigold, that's incredible." My father nodded, his pride practically radiating. I thought about the contract sitting on my desk at home, the one from a major streaming platform offering 6 figures to adapt Soul Sanctuary into a series. I had to bite my lip to keep from laughing. "When's the gala?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. "Saturday night," Marigold replied, her eyes glinting with superiority. "You should come, Zinnia. See what a real career looks like. I'll get you a seat. Way in the back, of course." She laughed, and my parents chuckled along, as if my existence was a punchline. I pushed my chair back, the scrape of wood on hardwood cutting through their laughter. "I might just do that," I said, standing. "I should go. Early meeting tomorrow." Marigold smirked. "A meeting? What, did someone actually subscribe to your podcast?" My mother sighed, her disappointment heavy. "Zinnia, when are you going to let this childish phase go? Your father could get you a job at his firm, something stable." I thought about the sleek office of Solace Media, the company I'd built from nothing, the one with my name, Zinnia Whitlock, on the high door. The one that was co-sponsoring the Gala Marigold was so proud to MC. "You're right, Mom," I said, grabbing my coat. "Maybe it's time for a change." They probably thought I was admitting defeat, ready to crawl back to their version of success. They had no idea what was coming. As I walked to my car, the cool Seattle air stung my cheeks, but it couldn't touch the fire inside me. I wasn't the loser they thought I was. I was Zinnia Whitlock, creator of Soul Sanctuary, and in a few days, I'd be the star of their precious gala. Let them laugh. Let them underestimate me. By Saturday night, they'd see exactly who I was. Driving back to my loft in downtown Seattle, the city's lights blurred through the windshield, a stark contrast to the suffocating glow of my parents' dining room. My hands gripped the steering wheel, still trembling from the sting of Marigold's words and my parents' dismissive stares. They thought I was a failure, a dreamer chasing a pointless hobby. They didn't know that their loser daughter had built something bigger than they could ever imagine. My loft wasn't the cramped apartment Marigold mocked. It was a sleek open space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Puget Sound. I'd bought it last year after Soul Sanctuary, my podcast about mental health and healing, hit 10 million downloads. But my family wouldn't know that. They never asked about my life, never cared enough to look beyond their assumptions. It all started 5 years ago, when I graduated with a communications degree. Marigold was already climbing the ranks at the Pacific Herald. Her articles splashed. Across front pages, her name whispered in elite circles. I could have followed her path, taken a job at a newspaper or TV station, but I wanted to tell stories that mattered in a different way. So I started Soul Sanctuary, pouring my heart into episodes about overcoming trauma, finding self-worth, and rebuilding after betrayal. My family laughed when I told them. "A podcast?" My father had scoffed. "That's not a career, that's a fad." They were wrong. My first episode, recorded on a cheap microphone in my old studio apartment, got a few hundred listens. Then, a few thousand. By the end of the first year, I had a loyal audience. People who wrote to me about how my words had pulled them through dark times. When I landed my first sponsorship deal, my mother called it pocket change. When I won a regional podcasting award, Marigold dismissed it as a participation trophy. They never listened to a single episode, never saw the letters from listeners who said Soul Sanctuary had saved them. 3 years ago, I took a bigger leap. I founded Solace Media, a digital content company under the name Zinnia Whitlock, my mother's maiden name. I chose it to keep my family in the dark, knowing they'd never bother to connect the dots. Solace Media grew fast, producing podcasts, video series, and mental health campaigns. Soul Sanctuary became its flagship, syndicated on major platforms, translated into 5 languages. Last month, it was named one of the top podcasts globally by the New York Times. And this Saturday, at the National Media Gala, I'd be accepting the Content Creator of the Year award as Zinnia Whitlock, the woman my family didn't know existed. I pulled into my building's private garage, my phone buzzing as I stepped out. A text from Marigold. Zinnia, come to the gala. Watch me own that stage. Maybe you'll learn what success looks like. I stared at the message, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. She had no idea that Solace Media was co-sponsoring the gala, that I was the one the organizers had begged to attend. I thought about the award waiting for me, the speech I'd been rehearsing, the moment I'd step into the spotlight Marigold thought was hers. Inside my loft, I sank into the leather chair at my desk, the city skyline sprawling before me. My laptop glowed with emails from my team at Solace Media. One caught my eye. A report about Marigold's attempt to secure a sponsorship from us for the Pacific Herald. My team had dug deeper, uncovering something I hadn't expected. Marigold had built her latest viral article, a supposed exposé on corporate greed, by stealing ideas from a junior reporter who'd trusted her. The reporter had been too scared to speak up, but my team had the emails, the drafts, the proof. I'd told them to hold off on any action. Not yet. The gala would be the perfect stage. I opened my speech for Saturday, the words staring back at me. It wasn't just about Soul Sanctuary or the award. It was about the years I'd spent proving myself, not to my family, but to the girl who'd I once believed she wasn't enough. I thought about Marigold's text, her smug invitation to watch her own the gala. She didn't know I'd be the one holding the microphone, the one with the power to decide who got to shine. My phone buzzed again. This time it was my mother. Zinnia, I know it's hard seeing Marigold soar while you're still finding your way. Let your father make some calls. It's not too late for a real job. I set the phone down, my eyes drifting to the wall of my office. Framed articles from Forbes and Wired hung there, praising Solace Media's rise and Zinnia Whitlock's quiet revolution in digital content. My family had spent years calling me a loser. In a few days, they'd see just how wrong they were. I stood, walking to the window, the lights of Seattle twinkling like stars. Marigold thought she'd be the center of the gala, dazzling the crowd with her charm. But I'd be the one they remembered. I wasn't just Zinnia Caldwell, the sister they pitied. I was Zinnia Whitlock, and I was ready to step into the light, the sow. National Media Gala was a glittering affair, held in a sleek Seattle ballroom with views of the Puget Sound shimmering through glass walls. Chandeliers cast golden light over tables draped in white linen, and the air buzzed with the chatter of journalists, influencers, and industry titans. I stood in front of a mirror backstage, smoothing the fabric of my navy velvet gown, its deep hue catching the light like the night sky. My hair was swept into an elegant updo, and for the first time in years, I felt like I belonged in a room like this. I wasn't Zinnia Caldwell, the family loser. I was Zinnia Whitlock, and tonight, I'd take my place. Out in the crowd, Marigold. Hensley was in her element, gliding through the room in a crimson dress that screamed for attention. As the gala's MC, she flashed her perfect smile, shaking hands with media moguls and posing for photos. My parents sat at a VIP table, their faces glowing with pride as Marigold's name echoed through the room. They thought she was the star of the night, the one everyone had come to see. They were about to be very, very wrong. The lights dimmed, and Marigold took the stage, her voice smooth and commanding. "Welcome to the National Media Gala," she said, pausing for applause. "Tonight, we celebrate the voices shaping our world. I'm honored to guide you through this evening." She didn't know that the organizers had only agreed to let her MC because I'd suggested it. I wanted her here, front and center, for what was coming. When it was time for the Content Creator of the Year award, Marigold's smile faltered as the spotlight shifted away from her. The executive director of the gala stepped up. "This year's recipient has redefined storytelling," he said. "Her work has touched millions, offering hope and healing. Please welcome Zinnia Whitlock, creator of Soul Sanctuary and founder of Solace Media." The room erupted in applause as I walked onto the stage, my heels clicking against the polished wood. Marigold's face froze, her eyes wide with disbelief. My parents, sitting just a few feet away, whispered furiously to each other, their confusion palpable. I took the microphone, my heart steady despite the weight of their stares. "Thank you," I said, my voice clear. "This award isn't just for me. It's for everyone who's ever been told their dreams don't matter." I gestured to the screen behind me, where a short clip from Soul Sanctuary began to play. It was an episode about overcoming family rejection, my voice weaving through stories of listeners who'd found strength despite being dismissed by those closest to them. "I know what it's like to be underestimated," I said as the clip ended. "To have your passion called a hobby, your work called a failure. But those doubts, they're fuel. They're what pushed me to build Soul Sanctuary, to create Solace Media, to stand here tonight." The audience leaned in, captivated, but I wasn't speaking to them. I was speaking to my family. I turned to the gala director. "I'd like to invite some special guests to join me," I said. "My parents, Mr. and Mrs. Caldwell, and my sister, Marigold Hensley." The crowd clapped politely as my family hesitated, then stood, their faces a mix of shock and unease. Marigold climbed the steps first, her smile strained, followed by my parents, who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. "Marigold," I said, facing her, "you've always said I was wasting my time, that my podcast was nothing compared to your career. But let me tell you something. Solace Media, the company I built, is co-sponsoring this gala. I'm not just a guest here. I'm the one they came to honor." Marigold's lips parted, but no words came out. The audience murmured, sensing the tension. I pressed on, my voice calm but unyielding. "You invited me here to watch you own the stage, but you wouldn't be standing here if I hadn't asked the organizers to give you the MC role." The crowd gasped, and Marigold's face went pale. "That's right," I said. "I wanted you here, not because you earned it, but because I needed you to see who I really am." My parents shifted uncomfortably, but I wasn't done. I turned to the screen again, where a new slide appeared, an email chain from the Pacific Herald. "Marigold, you built your career on talent, but also on shortcuts, like when you took credit for a junior reporter's exposé on corporate greed. I have the emails, the drafts, the proof you stole her work and called it yours." The screen showed the evidence clear as day, and the room fell silent. Marigold stammered, her composure cracking. That's not true. It was a misunderstanding." But her voice shook, and the audience wasn't buying it. I held her gaze. Solace Media was approached for a partnership with the Pacific Herald. I turned it down, not because of budget, but because I don't work with people who lack integrity. I turned to my parents, my voice softening but firm. "And you two, you spent years telling me I'd never measure up to Marigold. You never asked about my work. Never. Listen to my podcast. If you had, you'd know my name, Zinnia Whitlock, has been in the news for years. But you were too busy praising Marigold's headlines to notice mine." The screen behind me shifted to a montage of articles, Forbes, Wired, The Atlantic, all praising Solace Media's impact. My parents' faces drained of color, and Marigold looked like she might collapse. I stepped back, the weight of years lifting off my shoulders. "This isn't about revenge," I said, addressing the crowd now. "It's about truth. It's about building something real, something that matters, no matter who tries to tear you down." The applause was deafening, but Marigold's eyes burned with humiliation. My parents stood frozen, their pride in tatters. I handed the microphone back to the director and walked off the stage, my head high. I'd come to claim my moment, and I'd done it, not for them, but for me. The days after the National Media Gala felt like a storm had passed, leaving both wreckage and clarity in its wake. My phone buzzed endlessly with notifications, messages from colleagues, interview requests from journalists, and offers from streaming platforms wanting to collaborate with Solace Media. Soul Sanctuary climbed to the top of the podcast charts, its latest episode downloaded millions of times. But none of that compared to the quiet weight that had lifted from my chest. For the first time in years, I felt free. Not from my family's judgment, but from the need to prove them wrong. Marigold's world, on the other hand, was unraveling. The emails I'd revealed at the gala sparked a firestorm. The Pacific Herald launched an internal investigation, and within a week, the junior reporter whose work Marigold had stolen came forward with more evidence. Social media lit up with the story, and Marigold's carefully curated image as a star journalist began to crack. She wasn't fired, but she was demoted to a desk job, her bylines buried in the back pages. The gala had been her chance to shine. Instead, it became her undoing. My parents didn't fare much better. They'd always moved in Seattle's elite circles, their social calendar filled with charity balls and country club dinners. But after the gala, their names were whispered in a different tone. Friends distanced themselves, embarrassed by the public revelation that they'd dismissed their successful daughter while propping up Marigold's lies. My mother stopped posting her usual photos of garden parties, and my father's golf buddies suddenly had other plans. Their pride, once unshakable, was in tatters. I threw myself into work, channeling the gala's momentum into new projects. Solace Media signed a deal to adapt Soul Sanctuary into an audiobook series, and I was invited to speak at a global mental health conference. My loft became a revolving door for my team, who buzzed with ideas for expanding our reach. But late, at night, when the city was quiet, I'd sit by the window staring at the Puget Sound and think about the family I'd left behind on that stage. 3 months after the gala, a letter arrived, handwritten on my mother's monogrammed stationery. I recognized her elegant cursive immediately, and my stomach tightened as I opened it. "Zinnia," it began. "I've spent weeks trying to find the words. We were wrong. About you, about everything. I see now how much we hurt you, how we failed to see your strength. I'm proud of you, but I know that means little now. I hope one day you'll let us try again." I read it twice, searching for the warmth I'd craved as a child, but all I felt was a hollow ache. Proud? They were only proud because I'd forced them to see me. A week later, an email from Marigold popped up in my inbox. It was short, almost curt. "Zinnia, I messed up. I shouldn't have said those things about you. I'm working on myself, but I get it if you don't want to hear from me." It wasn't an apology, not really, just enough to ease her conscience. I could picture her typing it, still clinging to the arrogance that had defined her for years. I didn't reply. I kept both the letter and the email in a drawer, next to a faded photo of my grandmother. She'd been the only one who saw something in me, gifting me a journal when I was 10 and telling me to write the stories only you can tell. She'd died before Soul Sanctuary was born, but I like to think she'd be proud. Not of the awards or the headlines, but of the lives I'd touched. That photo, those letters, they weren't about forgiveness. They were reminders of what I'd overcome, of the strength I'd found in myself. I wasn't ready to let my family back in, and maybe I never would be. But the gala had done something I hadn't expected. It set me free. I didn't need their approval anymore. I didn't need their pride or their apologies. I'd built Solace Media, created Soul Sanctuary, not to prove them wrong, but to prove myself right. And that was enough. As the months passed, the story of the gala became a kind of legend in media circles. Not the drama, not Marigold's fall, but the quiet rise of Zinnia Whitlock, the woman who'd turned pain into purpose. I didn't care about the headlines. I cared about the emails from listeners, the ones who said my podcast had helped them leave toxic relationships, find therapy, or simply believe in themselves again. That was my legacy, not the family I'd left behind. Standing in my loft one evening, I looked out at the Seattle skyline, the lights reflecting on the water like a promise. I wasn't the girl who'd sat silently at that family dinner, swallowing her hurt. I was Zinnia Whitlock, and I was just getting started. A year after the National Media Gala, I sat in my office at Solace Media, the Seattle skyline stretching out before me like a canvas of possibilities. The Puget Sound sparkled under the morning sun, and the hum of my team working in the open plan space behind me felt like a heartbeat. On my desk was the latest issue of The Atlantic, its cover story bold and unmissable. Zinnia Whitlock, the voice redefining digital storytelling. I flipped through the pages, skimming the article. It didn't mention the gala, Marigold's downfall, or my family's dismissal. Instead, it focused on Soul Sanctuary, how it had sparked a global conversation about mental health, how Solace Media was empowering creators to tell stories that mattered. That was the legacy I wanted. I leaned back in my chair, the weight of the past year settling around me. The gala had been a turning point, not because it humbled my family, but because it freed me. I'd spent so long carrying their words, loser, failure, dreamer, like stones in my pockets. That night, I'd set them down, not to prove them wrong, but to prove myself right. Success, I'd learned, wasn't about headlines or applause. It was about building something real, something that lasted. Soul Sanctuary had grown beyond my wildest dreams. The audiobook series was a bestseller, and we'd launched a scholarship fund for young creators from underserved communities. Every week, I read letters from listeners, people who'd found courage to leave toxic jobs, rebuild after abuse, or simply look in the mirror and see someone worth loving. Those letters were my trophies, not the awards lining my shelves. My family had faded into the background. Marigold was still at the Pacific Herald, writing small features, her star dimmed but not extinguished. I heard she'd started therapy, though I doubted she'd ever fully own her mistakes. My parents had sent a few more letters, each one softer, more earnest, asking to meet, to get to know Zinnia Whitlock. I kept them in that drawer, next to my grandmother's photo, but I hadn't responded. Maybe one day I'd be ready to talk, to see if they could love the woman I'd become, not just the success I'd achieved. But for now, I didn't need their validation. I had my own. I stood and walked to the window, the city alive with movement. Below. A year ago, I'd been the girl at that family dinner, swallowing my hurt, hiding my fire. Now, I was Zinnia Whitlock, creator of Soul Sanctuary, founder of Solace Media, a woman who'd turned pain into purpose. The world had called me a star, but I didn't need the spotlight. I needed the work, the late-night scripting episodes, the emails from listeners, the quiet moments when I knew I was making a difference. As I looked out at the water, I thought about my grandmother, her voice echoing from years ago. Write the stories only you can tell. I'd done that, not just for her, but for me, for every person who'd ever been told they weren't enough. Success wasn't about silencing the doubters or outshining Marigold's headlines. It was about creating something that mattered, something that lived beyond you. I turned back to my desk, picking up a new script for Soul Sanctuary's next episode. The words flowed easily, each one a step in the journey I'd chosen. They'd called me a loser at that family dinner, but I'd never been one. I was a builder, a dreamer, a voice, and that was worth more than any gala could ever prove.